The sound of shattering glass echoed through the cafe as Vince's body crashed into the display. The once cocky biker now stared up in terror at the man standing over him. The same man whose dog he had kicked moments ago for fun. What happens when a bully picks the wrong target? Today's story shows how one cruel joke led to a lesson that changed a man forever. Pine Harbor was a kind of coastal town you'd see on postcards. Quaint shops with colorful awnings, boats gently bobbing the marina, and locals who greeted each other by name. Saturday mornings meant farmers' market day, with the town square transformed into a bustling hub of fresh produce, handmade crafts, and children's laughter. That peaceful rhythm shattered when the first rumble of motorcycles approached from the coastal highway. Heads turned as 5 Harley Davidsons thundered into town, their chrome gleaming under the morning sun. Leading the pack was Vince Rattlesnake Harley, president of the Desert Vipers Motorcycle Club. Vince stood 6'2" with broad shoulders and arms covered in faded tattoos. A former amateur boxer who never quite made it, he'd found power in intimidation instead. His leather vest displayed the Desert Vipers emblem, a coiled snake ready to strike, and beneath it, a patch reading President. "Look at this place," Vince called over his shoulder to the others. "Like something from a damn fairy tale." The 4 riders behind him laughed on cue. Among them was Tyler, a prospect trying to earn his full membership, eager to impress. The others, Skinner, Diesel, and Hawk, had ridden with Vince for years, following his lead without question. As they parked their bikes in a row, market-goers quickly created distance. A mother pulled her curious child closer. An elderly man selling honey frowned but said nothing. The local sheriff was 2 towns over at a conference, information Vince had verified before choosing today for their visit. "I'm starving," Vince announced, removing his gloves. "Let's find somewhere to eat." His gaze settled on the Lighthouse Cafe across the street, a charming blue building with a patio overlooking the harbor. Several tables were occupied by locals enjoying breakfast in the morning sun. "Perfect," Vince grinned, nodding toward the cafe. "Looks like a nice place to have some fun." The Desert Vipers crossed the street in formation, their boots heavy on the pavement. Conversations at the cafe quieted as they approached. Outside the entrance, 2 dogs waited patiently. A sleek Belgian Malinois with alert ears and a gray-white Husky with striking blue eyes, both wearing well-maintained harnesses. "Nice dogs," Tyler commented as they approached. Vince smirked. "Fancy pets for fancy people." The cafe's door chimed as Emma, the owner, stepped out with menus. Her welcoming smile faltered when she saw the bikers. "Table for 5?" she asked, professional despite her unease. "The patio," Vince replied, scanning the outdoor seating where several customers avoided eye contact. "We want the view." As Emma led them to a table, Vince noticed how people shifted in their seats, conversations dropping to whispers. He loved that effect, the power of making strangers uncomfortable with just his presence. "Hey, watch this," Vince muttered to Tyler, who was eager to impress the senior members. "Gonna give the new guy a little initiation challenge." Vince detoured toward the dogs, who sat obediently near a water bowl Emma had provided. The Husky wagged its tail as Vince approached, expecting a friendly greeting. "Bet these must get treated better than most people," Vince said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Then, with a quick glance to ensure his gang was watching, Vince swung his boot forward, connecting with the Husky's side. Not hard enough to cause serious injury, but enough to send the dog stumbling sideways with a pained yelp. The Malinois immediately stood, hackles raised but not attacking, clearly well-trained despite the provocation. A collective gasp rose from the cafe patrons. A young woman at a nearby table covered her mouth in shock. An elderly couple stood up in protest. "What the hell?" the old man called out, his hands shaking with anger. Vince laughed, turning back to his gang. "Just checking if it's real or one of those robot dogs." Emma had frozen in the doorway, her face suddenly pale. Her eyes darted to a corner table inside the cafe, where a man sat alone with his back to window. She quickly whispered something to a waitress, who nodded gravely. "Sir," Emma called to Vince, her voice tight. "Those dogs belong to—" "Don't care," Vince interrupted, still chuckling as he rejoined his gang. "Just having a little fun." Inside the cafe, at a corner table with a view of the harbor, Michael Thorne had been enjoying his Saturday ritual, black coffee, local newspaper, and a quiet hum of familiar voices. A man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed beard, he appeared ordinary at first glance. Only the observer might notice his perfect posture, the callous hands that suggested years of physical work, or the watchful eyes that occasionally scanned the room, old habits from a former life. Michael had moved to Pine Harbor 3 years ago, opening a small woodworking shop where he crafted custom furniture. Locals knew he'd served in special forces, though he never discussed it. They respected his privacy and appreciated his quiet contributions to the community. When the yelp of pain cut through the cafe's ambient noise, Michael's hand froze mid-turn of a newspaper page. His eyes narrowed slightly, the only visible reaction as his focus shifted entirely to sound. He knew that yelp. It was Kodiak, his husky. Emma, the cafe owner, glanced nervously toward Michael's table. She'd known him since he arrived in town and recognized the subtle change in his demeanor, the stillness that wasn't quite normal. "Sir," she said, approaching his table. "I'm so sorry, but there's a situation with your dogs. Some bikers just arrived and—" "I heard," Michael replied, his voice calm as he folded the newspaper precisely. Emma lowered her voice. "The big one kicked Kodiak. Not hard enough to hurt him badly, but—" She hesitated. "They're desert vipers. They've caused trouble in neighboring towns." Michael nodded once, placing his napkin beside his half-finished coffee. His movements were unhurried, methodical. "Should I call someone?" Emma asked, knowing the sheriff was out of town. "No need," Michael said, standing. His expression remained neutral, but something changed in his eyes, a focused intensity that made Emma step back instinctively. As he moved toward the door, conversations quieted. Those who knew Michael recognized something in his walk, a controlled purpose they'd never seen in a typically reserved woodworker. "Michael," Emma whispered as he passed. "Please don't." But he was already through the door. Michael stepped onto the patio, sunlight catching the silver in his hair. His first move wasn't toward the bikers, but to his dogs. He knelt briefly beside the husky, checking him with gentle hands. The dog whimpered softly, recognizing his owner. "You're okay, Kodiak," Michael murmured, running his hand along the dog's side where Vince had kicked him. Finding no serious injury, he stood and faced the biker's table. Vince and his gang were laughing, sharing some joke as they looked over menus. They hadn't noticed Michael yet. A man in a simple flannel shirt and jeans, nothing intimidating about his appearance. "Excuse me," Michael said, his voice quiet but carrying across the suddenly silent patio. Vince looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "What?" "You kicked my dog," Michael stated. No accusation in his tone, just a simple fact. The biker leader sized up Michael, noting the lack of visible threat, and smirked. "Maybe he shouldn't have been in the way." "I'd like an apology," Michael continued, "and $50 for a vet check." This triggered laughter from the entire gang. Skinner, Vince's lieutenant, nearly choked on his water. "You hear that, boss?" Diesel called out. "Guy wants you to say sorry to his mutt." Vince stood slowly, towering over his seated companions. At 6'2", he had a slight height advantage over Michael, which he clearly intended to use. "Listen, buddy," Vince said, stepping around the table. "I don't know who you think you are, but nobody tells Rattlesnake what to do, especially not some local nobody." Michael didn't back up as Vince entered his personal space. "I'm only asking once." Something in Michael's calm demeanor made Tyler, the prospect, shift uncomfortably. Vince, maybe we should—" "Shut it," Vince snapped without looking back. To Michael, he growled, "You should walk away while you still can." When Michael didn't move, Vince placed both hands on his chest and shoved hard, a move that had intimidated countless men before. Michael didn't budge an inch. It was like pushing against a wall. Confusion flashed across Vince's face, quickly replaced by anger. He shoved again, harder. This time, Michael moved, but not backward. His hand shot up, gripping Vince's wrist while simultaneously stepping sideways. A simple redirect of momentum sent Vince stumbling forward, off balance and unprepared. The biker leader crashed into an empty table, sending glasses and silverware clattering to the ground. The patio fell completely silent. Vince scrambled to his feet, face flushed with embarrassment and rage. The cafe patrons had all stopped eating, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. Some had phones out, recording. "You're dead," Vince snarled, his hand instinctively reaching toward his belt where a hunting knife was clipped. Before he could grab it, Skinner and Diesel were already on their feet, moving to flank Michael. They were experienced fighters who had handled bar brawls across 3 states. "We got this, boss," Skinner said, cracking his knuckles. Michael remained perfectly still, his breathing steady. "This doesn't involve them," he said to Vince. "Just you and me." Skinner lunged first, throwing a practice right hook aimed at Michael's jaw. In one fluid motion, Michael tilted his head back just enough for the fist to miss by centimeters, while simultaneously gripping Skinner's extended arm. A subtle shift of weight, a precise application of pressure to the elbow joint, and Skinner found himself face down on the wooden deck, arm twisted behind him at an angle that sent shooting pain up to his shoulder. Diesel attacked from the other side, more cautious after seeing Skinner taken down so easily. He feinted left before throwing a powerful right cross. Michael slipped the punch like a seasoned boxer, stepped inside Diesel's guard, and delivered a single, sharp strike to the solar plexus. The big biker doubled over, all air expelled from his lungs, then dropped to his knees gasping. Both men neutralized in less than 5 seconds. Tyler and Hawk remained frozen at the table, suddenly uncertain about their odds. Vince stared in disbelief. No one had ever handled his men so efficiently. "Who the hell are you?" Vince demanded, now fully drawing his hunting knife. The 7-inch blade caught the sunlight. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Emma stepped onto the patio, but kept her distance. "Sir, please, no weapons," she called out. Michael's expression hadn't changed. "Put away," he said quietly. "You're making this worse yourself." In the distance, a police siren wailed. Someone had called the deputy. "I'm not asking again," Michael added, his stance subtly shifting. Vince lunged forward. Slashing the knife in a wide arc, Michael moved like water, effortlessly flowing away from the blade's path. As Vince overextended, Michael captured his knife hand at the wrist, applying precise pressure to the radial nerve while simultaneously twisting. The knife clattered to the ground. Vince howled in pain as his wrist bent at an unnatural angle, not broken, but sprained badly enough that his fingers went numb. In one continuous motion, Michael swept Vince's legs from under him. The biker leader crashed onto his back, the wind knocked from his lungs. Before he could recover, Michael had retrieved a knife and stood over him, the blade pointed downward but not threatening. "Stay down," Michael advised. "It's over." A police cruiser pulled up outside the cafe, lights flashing. Deputy Rodriguez stepped onto the patio, hand resting cautiously on his holstered weapon. He surveyed the scene. 2 bikers on the ground groaning, one clutching his wrist, and Michael Thorne standing calmly with a knife pointed downward. "Michael," the deputy nodded, visibly relaxing when he recognized him. "Want to tell me what happened here?" Before Michael could answer, Emma stepped forward. "These men were causing trouble, deputy." The leader kicked Michael's dog, then pulled a knife when confronted. Several patrons nodded in confirmation, holding up phones that had recorded the incident. "That true?" Rodriguez asked, looking at Vince, who was still on the ground. Vince glared but said nothing, cradling his sprained wrist. The deputy turned to Michael. "You want to press charges?" Michael considered for a moment, then shook his head. "No, but they'll pay for any damages to the cafe, and I'd like them to leave town." Rodriguez nodded, understanding the mercy being offered. He'd known Michael long enough to respect his judgment. "All right," the deputy announced to bikers. "You're getting a break today. Pay for the damages, then I'll escort you to the town line." Hawk, the only gang member who hadn't participated in the fight, quickly pulled out his wallet. "How much for the broken table and glasses?" Emma calculated the damages, adding, "and $50 for the vet check." While Hawk paid, Michael returned to his dogs. The Malinois had remained perfectly positioned throughout the confrontation, while Kodiak, the Husky, approached cautiously. Michael knelt, running his hands gently over the dog's side again. "Let me see," said a woman who stepped forward. It was Dr. Patel, the local veterinarian who had been having breakfast nearby. She examined Kodiak carefully. "No serious damage. He'll be bruised, but nothing's broken. He's a tough boy." Kodiak licked Michael's hand, as if confirming the diagnosis. Across the patio, the bikers were getting to their feet. Vince's face was a mask of humiliation as he watched Michael with his dogs. For perhaps the first time in years, something resembling shame flickered across his features. "Time to go," Deputy Rodriguez instructed, gesturing toward their motorcycles. As they filed out, Vince paused, looking back at Michael. Their eyes met briefly, a wordless exchange that acknowledged something had fundamentally changed. Pine Harbor returned to normal by afternoon. The farmers' market continued, though the morning's events became the talk of the town. Michael declined Emma's offer of free coffee for a month, insisting on paying his bill before leaving with his dogs. "Just a regular Saturday," he said with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. 6 months passed. Autumn painted the coastal town in warm colors. Michael was working in his wood shop when the bell above the door chimed. He looked up to see a familiar face. Vince, alone and without his leather vest. Your sign says open, Vince said awkwardly, standing just inside the doorway. Michael nodded, setting down his tools. What can I help you with? I'm not here for furniture. Vince cleared his throat. I came to apologize. What I did to your dog, it wasn't right. Michael studied him silently. I've been doing some community service, Vince continued, at the animal shelter in Riverdale. Court ordered at first, but he shrugged. Turns out I'm good with the difficult cases. Dogs nobody wants because they're too aggressive. Animals respond to how they're treated. Michael observed. Yeah, figured that out. Vince extended his hand. No hard feelings? After a moment, Michael accepted the handshake. As Vince turned to leave, Michael called after him. Those difficult dogs, they just need patience and consistency. Same things people need. Vince nodded, understanding the deeper message. Outside the shop, Kodiak and the Malinois waited patiently. As Vince passed, Kodiak wagged his tail, a simple gesture of forgiveness that meant more than words ever could. True strength Michael had shown wasn't about domination or fear. It was about restraint, mercy, and the courage to change. Stories like this remind us that true power lies not in intimidation, but in how we choose to use our strength. Michael could have seriously injured Vince and his gang, but chose restraint instead, and that decision ultimately led to genuine change. If this story resonated with you, please consider supporting our channel by hitting that like button and subscribing. Your engagement helps us continue sharing these meaningful stories about justice, redemption, and unexpected heroes. What would you have done in Michael's position? Would you have shown the same restraint? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the strongest people aren't those who display their power, but those who know when not to use it. That's a lesson worth carrying into our everyday lives. For more stories that explore the complexities of human nature and the power of second chances, join our community. New videos daily. Until next time, thank you for watching.